Even at E0 S0, Jiaoqiu is just straight up better than Pella in 90% of situations. And that's not so much due to his debuff potency, but more so the fact that his debuffs are pretty much unconditional and very sticky to the enemies. In a stage like Pure Fiction, you won't need to constantly reapply a debuff that Pella has to. Okay, before we start the video, I'd like to address a few things. First of all, yes, this is the same room. The camera is just in front of me rather than pointing to the side, just a different angle. And also, yes, the bed is gone. It was a good run, but all good things come to an end. I now sleep on the floor. It's just that I'm in a decorating spirit right now and trying to spice up the room for stream and for YouTube videos. So you'll see some changes in the next couple of however long it takes me to get all of this done. Anyway, yeah, you read the title right. I am pulling Jiaoqiu. In fact, I guess it's kind of clickbait because I technically already did pull him yesterday on stream.
Jiaoqiu will be in this temple. No! No! No!
I lost a 50-50 and then had to go all the way to soft pity yet again to get him. I always wanted to pull E0 S1, but I stopped at E0 and tested him for a good 2 to 3 hours in Pure Fiction, APOC, and also MOC to see his performance in the endgame moods compared to someone like Pella, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised. Jiaoqiu's main selling point is for Acheron teams, because not only does he apply a lot of debuffs that make it so you do more damage, he also applies them very frequently, which makes it so that Acheron gets a lot of stacks to ult again. He's basically like an energy battery for Acheron, whereas someone like Tingyun is an energy battery for our traditional hyper carries. On top of that, Jiaoqiu also buffs ultimate damage, which is 90% or so of Acheron's damage. So we can start to see why they would be a formidable pairing, and he's basically Acheron's premium option. But I was actually curious to, outside that, how would he perform? I brought him in as a Pella replacement at E0 S0. I was running the tutorial light cone instead, and he was actually doing very decent. For a Jingliu team, for example, against Argentina, second half of MOC 12, I managed to clear in 4 cycles, whereas with my E1 S1 run Mei, and when I try my hardest, I clear in 2 cycles. So I don't think it's the worst. It's definitely usable in the sense that if I used him instead of run Mei, if I only had him in my account and used him on that side, I would still get a 4 cycle clear, which is lower than the average 5 cycles needed for each side of MOC 12 to get a total of under 10 cycles clear. In Pure Fiction and other game modes as well, I put him in places where you would normally put Pella, and I saw decent success with him. At talent level 10, he applies a 35% vulnerability debuff to the enemies, which is less than Pella's 42% defense down on enemies at talent level 12. But as I said at the start of the video, the nice thing about him is that his debuffs are very sticky, and you don't really have to worry about uptime too much because it's 100% uptime, whereas someone like Pella will have downtime. Unless you speed tune perfectly or you calculate the waves and everything like that. So on paper, if you just look at the vulnerability debuff that Jiaoqiu applies, Pella's damage amplification for your squad is just higher. However, the catch is Jiaoqiu has an additional 15% damage vulnerability for ultimates casted by your team. So that especially benefits people like Acheron and just characters that rely on your ultimate a lot, such as Argentina, maybe even Herta and Himeko. And at that point, 35 plus 15 brings us up to 50% damage vulnerability applied to the enemy. And so if your character is mainly doing ultimate damage, at E0, Jiaoqiu's debuffs are stronger than Pella's. So far, I just gave you some observations of mine. However, now this is where it really gets interesting and personal, because the reason why for my account specifically, I'm not making all these videos to say you should or you shouldn't pull. I'm just explaining why I pull. The reason why I pulled is because I'm a vertical investment player. If you have seen my previous videos or any video where I talk about my pulling decisions and why I pull certain things and how I play, you would see that I like stacking stuff on top of each other. If I find a unit that I really like, I will invest into them. I'm like the kind of guy that goes to a restaurant, orders one food, and I find I really like it, and I just keep ordering that food every single time. Hey, that analogy is fitting because Jiaoqiu's a cook. Anyway, the thing with Pella in the past is that Pella is limited by the fact that she's a 4-star unit in the sense. If she was a 5-star, she would have more insane debuffing capabilities, theoretically. And so, in a sense, Jiaoqiu is our 5-star Pella, and he is unleashed. For the low price of pulling a signature like Cone, which is subjective if you can value it that highly or not, or if you can afford it or not, you can get 24% additional vulnerability debuff, which is pretty crazy to me because it's universal vulnerability debuff. Think about it this way, Jiaoqiu's whole existence, right? His entire kit does a lot of things like apply a bit of dot and stuff like that, but at its core, he's just a vessel to apply 35% damage deepen on the enemy. That's his whole purpose. And if you're someone that uses ultimates a lot, then also your ultimates benefit from 15% additional, but that's conditional. His light cone not only makes it so that his effect hit rate requirements are easier to meet, generally around 140 plus to 170 plus, but it's also an unconditional additional 24% damage deepen. That's almost, I don't know the math, but like 2/3 of his original kit's existence, right? Unconditionally. So you go from 35% damage deepen, unconditional, to 59% unconditional. And if you have alts, it becomes like 64%, if my math is correct. 64% damage deepen on your alts. He's already good without it, but with it, it's like, woo! With that said, he's not a must pull. There's no such thing as a must pull, right? If you're clearing fine with Pella, is there really a need to? Do you want to clear faster? If so, then yeah, he is a good way to clear faster. I managed to clear in one cycle with my E0 Acheron team using 2 4-stars alongside them as well in Memory of Chaos 12. But don't get me wrong, that sounds insane. And you might think, okay, if you have E0 as one Jiaoqiu, Pella is Jover, is GG. But nope, it's not to say that he replaces her. In fact, the nice thing is that now you can run Jiaoqiu and Pella together. And wow, it feels like the sky's the limit, right? Acheron is absolutely dumpstering now. And if you have Silver Wolf, you can run him and Silver Wolf as well. And it's just great. It's just a good time. On top of that, I like to talk a bit about his flexibility. And this is exclusively for someone who pulls Eidolons. I'm heavily considering his E1. I've not pulled it yet. But E1 brings us one Eidolon away from E2. And even without E2, he does some DOT damage in his kit. I didn't really mention it because it is not that relevant and I wouldn't really suggest building for it. I would just suggest building full speed Jiaoqiu to apply as much debuffs as possible for Acheron. But at E2, he gets a massive increase to his DOT damage and makes him like pretty much a replacement for Runmei and Robin in DOT teams. I'm not sure about him replacing Black Swan and still running Runmei. I haven't really heard too much people talk about that, but I assume that'll be good as well. So just that fact alone makes it really tempting for me. I know Dot is not in the best positions as of now, still can clear content, but it's not getting the super break treatment where everyone is fire weak and their content based around breaking that's being introduced to the game. And follow-ups are getting a lot of love as well with the recent new units launched. However, it's still a team archetype and it's probably like power aside, like strength aside, I think it's one of my favorite team archetypes in the game. So as someone who only has hyper carries right now and who is looking to branch out, it's very tempting to get him so I can get another foot in the door. I've built my account since day one in hopes of just stabilizing, getting a lot of supports, and then seeing where the game is going, seeing what archetypes solidify. So I have a good idea of what I'm getting myself into before pulling the specific team archetypes. And I think I'm at a point where I will start to pull specific team archetypes. Or at least limited 5 stars for it. Like I do play Super Break, it's just with Himeko instead. And I play Follow Up, but it's like Himeko, Herta, Clara. Anyway, with Jiaoqiu and the option to just get his E2, which once again is not something I recommend or suggest that you go do right now because it's the best thing ever, just for me. All I need then is Kafka to have a DOT team because I already have a well-invested Runmei. And now, instead of having to pull both Black Swan and Kafka, if I have Jiaoqiu, especially at E2, I just pull Kafka. And okay, before I give my final closing thoughts and just answer some questions that I received a lot on stream yesterday, I just want to say that I really like Foxman. And this is something I try to say in the videos, but I don't know how much to emphasize because it's ultimately subjective. But Foxman has sick animations. His open world animations, that ultimate. I also like his character. I like these mysterious characters that you don't really know what they're thinking. I put Luocha for similar reasons. So yeah, I really, really, really enjoy him, which is why I don't mind vertically investing into him as well. And I really did consider at one point to pull E6 S5, but now seeing how my pulls went, I am less confident that I'll be able to get it with my funds that I've saved 5 months for. But yeah, his E6 is so good though. His E6 is so good. Wow. I feel like his E6 is a vertical investor's dream. Can I just take a moment to say how clean his skill animation is as well? My goodness. It's just clean. It's nothing too fancy or anything. It's just a bunch of smoke sizzles and then boom. I don't know. It's great. I really enjoy it. Okay, now I'd like to answer some questions because even though I don't make these videos to inform you whether you should pull or not, I'm just sharing my own thoughts and perspectives on it. But I know you would want to hear what I think regarding that as well. So I'll just say that if you really like Acheron and you want to vertical invest a bit, I think he's great. But you definitely don't need him. Pella has been working so far really well. We've said Pella is Acheron's best support up to now, and she's her best support for a reason. Just because a new unit releases and is stronger than her doesn't make her trash now. It still means she can clear. Sure, she's not the best anymore. However, you can run them together like I said earlier, and we don't need the newest, shiniest things all the time. I also know a lot of people are saving for facial right now, so there'll be a lot of skippers. But don't let that deter you if you want to pull him. I think he's a very fine and good option. Because especially with E1 and S1, he might be more universal than you think. The nice thing about pulling supports is that they are flexible. So let's say you're an Acheron player and you don't have a run Mei. You could get him, maybe you get lucky or you invest a bit, E1, S1 him. You could put him literally in spots of where you would normally put Runmei in other teams. Jingliu team, Argentine team, just whatever team that wants Runmei, which is a lot of teams, because he's basically the debuff version of Runmei. Maybe not as strong as at E0, but the thing is, right, you can put Eidolons on him to make him stronger while still being a great for Acheron. With Runmei E1 S1, she's great everywhere, but not that good at Acheron teams. I think of it as Jiaoqiu thrives in Acheron teams and is really good everywhere else with investment, whereas Runmei is good everywhere with investment but can't penetrate Acheron teams, whereas Jiaoqiu can. And as someone who loves amplifiers and supports, I think it's great. But yeah, those are my honest thoughts. I know people generally don't like others talking about Eidolons because it feels like whale territory and stuff they can't reach because they can't save for their life. But I saved and I'm allowed to talk about me getting Eidolons because it's a thing in the game. I guess another very common question I got was E1 or S1. Personally, I think S1 is the way to go. To solve some common misconception, his E1 is not 40% damage deepen. The way it's worded, it's basically 40% damage amplification, which is what you get from an orb or what you get from Runmei basically, if I'm not mistaken. Damage deepen is a separate multiplier and so is less saturated and then more potent. So I would actually prefer the 24% damage deepen, especially since it gives you 60% effect hit rate on the light cone as well, which makes building him much easier. But his E1 is still really good though, but I feel like it's low-key held back a bit by the fact that the second part of it, the increased stack generation part, is not that relevant most of the time. Because apart from first turn of the battle, enemies will always be 5-stack debuffed by him. Anyway, yeah, once again, I love Fox Guy. I think it's funny how his whole personality, and he said so many times that he's a healer, he's a medicinal healer, food is good, food can heal, and then you get him in his kit, and it's just he poisons enemies 24/7. Could that be foreshadowing, Hoyo? I don't know. Is he up to some evil scheme? Hoyo is generally pretty good with matching characters' personality and story with the kid, so. But anyway, yeah, I'll be playing, testing, yapping more about Jiaoqiu on stream later. I'm having a blast with him so far, 1 day in. I'll see you there. By the time this video goes live, I'll most likely be streaming. So yeah, Take care. Peace.